Good evening, gentlemen. I have a great show for you tonight. So, I have some news regarding a disaster going on in Italy right now, but I also have a quick, funny little story that I think you might find entertaining. So, in Italy, their current prime minister has been, um, she has been slandered by the mainstream media all over the world as being a Nazi, a right wing extremist. Um, but yet, right now, Italy is being flooded with immigrants. Illegal aliens are being flooded in there at flat out crazy rates. Um, and she's doing almost nothing to stop that. She's letting in most of them. She's made the acceptance rate for legal immigration ridiculously high. Thousands are allowed each year, according to her current legal immigration standards, her current legal immigration uh, legislation. So that brings an interesting point that if what's going on in Italy right now is a far right wing extremist position, then what is the moderate right wing extremist position? Only 1,000 immigrants into Italy a year? Only 1,000 blacks and browns into Italy a year? Not to mention, if so, what would be the centrist uh, position? 20,000 legal immigrants in a year? 40,000 legal immigrants in a year? Or how about the leftist position? 1 million immigrants into Italy each year? Or I guess I'm assuming at least 100,000. Um, so, yeah. A lot, there's some people who are saying it's from Russia. And to be fair to Putin, she has sort of been way too close for comfort with Zelensky. Um, so I think it would be so if this is true, then perhaps there is some nuance in the situation that what's happening is justified or there's a good reason for what's happening. But with that said, it's terrible for the Italian people. It's terrible for the white people living in Italy, and I think the white race as a whole. But I don't think it is Vladimir Putin. I think it's the globalists. I think it's the globalist, the Soros backed globalists. That's what I would guess it is. And they're redirecting a lot of them to other European countries like England and France, countries that have been turned into dung heaps due to all the immigrants in their countries. Paris used to be known as the city of beauty, the city of love, the most beautiful place in the world. But now I've had I talked to my friends who've been to Paris recently in the last few years, and they said it was awful. It was an awful waste of time, and it was so disappointing to what they thought it was going to be. They described it as being dirty. They described it as being crime ridden. They described it as being gross, as being beneath them. And do you know why Paris is like that? And also, for that matter, London, perhaps to a lesser degree, because of the immigration policies, because these two cities have been flooded with immigrants. They were beautiful, they were cities of love, but not anymore. Same goes for almost all European capitals. Berlin, that's gone down the drain. Rome, that's become terrible. The only capitals that haven't been ruined by immigration are the capitals of Eastern Europe, or sorry, like within white majority countries, outside of America, which is definitely getting there, are Eastern European countries such as Russia and Poland. America hasn't been flooded to the extent that England and France and Germany have been, but it's certainly getting there. So the globalists have essentially turned all of Europe into a dung heap, basically. A horrible, disgusting, wretched place, which used to be the best place in the world. Europe used to be the best place in the world, but it isn't anymore. This is the power of the globalists. Perhaps we should take a quick break from the heavy stuff and talk about a very light story. So, the US Senate is abolishing their dress code for John Fetterman because John Fetterman is the guy with the facial hair and the bald head who's always wearing hoodies. So I think this sort of this story could be used as a metaphor for both the general way Fetterman is and the way that a lot of the Democratic Party has gotten. So with Fetterman, so normally in in debates, what they have is they just read out the question. But for Fetterman, they had to put up a big sign explaining the question and what was going on and having earpieces explain it to him. Why is this? Well, he had a stroke, and the stroke messed up his brain. And it's to this extent where, so he's not deaf, he can hear fine, but the stroke has damaged his comprehension level so badly that if he's just asked a question, he can't understand it. He needs to hear it over and over again or read it over and over again to be able to understand what it meant or what it means. That's how bad the stroke scrambled his brain. So the stroke ruined his brain. They've made it a public fact to everyone to know that his stroke ruined his brain. But the Democratic voters elected him as their senator to represent them as a people after knowing that, after they learned that. What the heck? So Fetterman can't do anything right. He's basically a zombie, a lot worse than a zombie, actually. And he, so since he's just retarded, he can't even wear correct clothing. He just has to wear like sweatpants all the time because his brain is all gone. So now the Senate has gotten rid of their sacred rules. I'm laughing, but I do think this story, even though this story is fun and I'm sort of talking about it in a flippant manner, I do think this does go down to something deeper, which is the Democrats lowering standards for everyone. This happens all the time. The time they said table manners, teaching table manners to children is racist because black people have bad manners. The time they said that we have to have mail-in voting because people just aren't good enough. We shouldn't expect people to be good enough to vote in person. Or the fat acceptance movement, the idea that we shouldn't expect people to be good enough to eat right and to exercise once in a while. while this I do think this specific story is somewhat funny. This does go to something that isn't funny and is actually really terrible, which is and serious and dangerous, which is the Democrats lowering standards for the American people. But to be fair, there are conservatives that do this too. I think both parties, the Republicans and the Democrats, do this. I think it's worse on the Democratic side, but it's a big problem on the Republican side too. And this is why America is losing. America is losing to China. We're losing to Russia. We're losing to China and Russia. Um, we keep failing. We couldn't even win a war against Afghanistan. And I think the fact that we're lowering standards is a big part of it. We don't have standards for how to behave as a country anymore. So that's why we're losing to everyone and we lose to everyone. America is supposed to have the greatest military in the world, but then we lost to Afghanistan, a third world country. A backwards, well, a backwards country. I put that in quotation marks because as far as cultural aspects, in a lot of ways, Afghanistan is better than America. That Afghanistan is better on feminism, better on homosexuality, better on transgenderism, better on contraceptives. Better on sodomy. So it's actually better in a lot of ways. But with that said, it is a very poor country, and they have almost no money to spend on their military, but yet they beat us anyways. Though I don't think that's just low standards. I think there's several different things going on. But you know what's a big part of that? The fact that the Afghanistan people actually believe in that stuff. In Afghanistan, it's not just this hedonistic, meaningless, materialistic point of view of, well, just do what's happy, or just makes what makes you feel good, or let's just make things a little bit better. Let's make living standards a little bit better. They actually had a big thing to believe in, which is Islam, which is traditional values, which is their heritage, which is their family name. I remember this story I read where in the Soviet Union, there were these two people that were assigned to work to each other in World War II. But one of them was interrogated by the other one several years before World War II started. And we're talking about the Soviet Union. So interrogating means torturing according to the Soviet Union. So, but they worked together like they were brothers. So he treated the person who tortured him like he was his brother. Why would you do that? Because it wasn't just a stupid, ridiculous, materialistic point of view of just, oh, I want to fight in the war because, oh, it might help the economy. No, it was a big, meaningful thing. So fascism gives you something not good enough to fight for. The communist regimes of Stalin, Mao, North Korea, Pol Pot, they gave you something like this to fight for. The Islamic fundamentalist belief system gives you something like this to fight for. And in America, we should have something like this to fight for, but we don't. We don't. And this is also why there's so many worker shortages in the US right now. No one will work because no one has anything to work for. Being a Zoomer, if you don't know the truth like I do, being a Zoomer seems meaningless. As a Zoomer, you feel like your life is meaningless. Well, I think I can talk a lot more on this subject, but I think I'm just going to call it good for today's stream and then talk more about something like this tomorrow or sometime later.